Hi everyone, welcome to our final Open Election India Hangout on air. My name's Asha Phillips. I'm the editor in Asia for Storyful, and I'll be moderating this Hangout today, which will be discussing the use and the role of social media in the 2014 elections and whether or not it's actually been used effectively by the candidates and their parties as well. So viewers who are watching can ask questions throughout the panel using the hashtag OpenElectionsIndia or by using the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of the video screens. And we'll take questions from the audience throughout the discussion as well as at the end, so throw them out there at any time. So I'd like to welcome our distinguished panelists to the Hangout on Air. I'm joined today by Sarab Shukla. He's an award-winning journalist, currently editor-in-chief of News Mobile, which is the first news portal and app for the young people in India. It's a very interesting project. And he's also a consulting editor for the India Today group. So welcome.
Thanks, Asha.
We also have Maxwell Pereira, who is a former Indian police service officer, known to call a spade and take the bull by the horn. He's been really active and a regular contributor on our Storyful Open Elections India Google Plus community, and we're really happy to have him here. So welcome, Maxwell. We also have Sukumar, a senior journalist commentator who's also at the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies. So welcome, Sukumar.
Thank you.
And finally, last but not least, we have Shantanu Gura Ray. He has 3 decades of experience in journalism, working in both print and electronic and multimedia. He's worked in magazines at ESPN, CNN, IBM, and is now the editor for India at Central European News. Welcome. So as I mentioned, the topic today to round up our Hangouts on Air is looking at social media and how it's been used by the political parties and the candidates throughout this election. And of course, this is really why Storyful is here and why our Google Plus community exists as well. And we've seen really social media emerging as quite a serious and powerful contender for an alternative narrative during these elections, as opposed to content coming straight from mainstream media. And I think it's fair to say that the political parties and the politicians themselves know this and have taken advantage of this. So, the urgency for political parties to use social media and to reach out to internet users is well known. And a recent study by Iris Knowledge Foundation and the Internet and Mobile Association of India found that social media could actually influence the electoral outcome in as many as 160 out of 543 constituencies representing the Lok Sabha, the lower house. So I'm going to pose a question to my panelists this evening. These constituencies are mostly located in urban pockets where internet is obviously much more widely used. So, how much of an influence does social media, or do you think it will have in the elections, considering that not all areas of India have the same access to internet and social media? Saurabh, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. During my travels in Uttar Pradesh, which is India's most populous state and gets 80 seats to the Lok Sabha, that's the lower house of the Parliament, I've seen that even in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, small urban centers, there is a mushrooming of web cafes. A lot of web cafes where students are going, even adults are going there. Certainly, so this is mushroomed over the last few years. So the social media penetration is growing beyond obviously the metros, which is a recent phenomenon. And obviously, in the elections as well, for instance, a lot of parody videos, even things they may not be doing, may not be on Twitter, they may not be tweeting that regularly, but they're certainly going to YouTube. They're certainly browsing videos about various politicians. For instance, I can tell you there was a whole series of funny videos which were spread around by various groups on during the elections, be it on Arvind Kejriwal, the AAP leader, or Rahul Gandhi mostly, and even on Narendra Modi. Although Modi had the least number of these humorous videos. So these were very popular. So certainly the reach of social media is growing. Yes, Twitter and some of the other means still have a long way to catch up beyond urban cities, but in tier two, smallest towns, even in Uttar Pradesh, the social media is penetrating during the Indian elections. Asha?
Thanks. Shantanu, what about you? How do you think, this is going to have any impact, if any, on the result?
Well, it will have an impact, Asha, and obviously there are reasons why it will have an impact. The social media boom in India started in 2013, the state elections. And my analysis showed me that at that point of time, there were 1.5 million people who were actually active on the social media. And now that figure is almost 3 million, which shows India is growing fast. India has already had a telecom boom, so obviously the handset magic is not just limited to the cities, it's now gone on to the villages. Now let's come to the way the political parties are using it. The political party, as you, especially primarily the Aam Aadmi Party and the Bharatiya Janata Party, which is the right-wing party, they're using it to the maximum. The Aam Aadmi Party has done it brilliantly. I think they know the two formats of the way they're campaigning is primarily through the internet, which is the social media, and the age-old formation of rallies on the road. They have successfully done it, followed by the Bharatiya Janata Party. The BJP took the lead over Congress because they planned it way back in 2007. When the Modi video or the Modi YouTube was launched. Today, it's been followed by hundreds and thousands. Political parties are using it because in this election, an estimated 3 million voters will actively get involved in social media, and another 4 million will actively be associated with or somewhere associated. So that's a big figure. So obviously, social media has become important, and it's up to political parties the way they want to use it. Two parties have done it very well. The others, I'm afraid, they haven't done it.
Yeah, and I will come, I will ask a question more specifically around maybe the best case scenarios and some of the fails that, have happened on social media. We'll get to that a little bit later, but I just want to focus again on, the number of voters online, the percentage of youth that are online, and what that might mean, in terms of the swing for the election. And I mentioned before this IRIS Knowledge Foundation study. It's estimating that there could be a 3 to 4% swing in these elections because of the way social media has been able to communicate with the majority of first-time voters. So there's about 160 million first-time voters who are, between 18 to 24 years old. A lot of those people are online, and at least they're on social media. So how much of a game changer are those people going to be in this election? Sukumar.
Yeah, well, we have a whole new generation that's come into the electoral arena with these elections, and most of these people were born after 1992. All of them, in fact. They would be reaching the age of 22 at this point, and they have no real first-hand memories of what is called the Ayodhya mobilization in the 1980s, when the BJP kind of rode to power on the back of fairly aggressive anti-minority political platform. So, and many of these new voters are also very tech savvy, even if they don't have access to the full range of services on offer in the new information age. They do have access to cell phones, many of them, and that is proving the most kind of potent instrument of communication. But I would suggest that because social media's uniqueness is that it allows people to talk back, unlike the traditional media, where you have to content yourself with just listening to what you're told through the television set or radio or whatever, or the newspapers. Here, it allows you to talk back, and I don't think any party has really found a way of using that unique feature of social media, because most parties don't want to hear the talk back. They want to basically deal with politics in the conventional old-fashioned way, which is that they talk down to the voters. Nobody is really quite interested in hearing what they have to say. And illustrative example is that Mr. Modi, who's widely regarded as the front runner, gave his first full-fledged interview to a TV channel, to an independent TV channel. He had several very friendly interviews earlier, but the first really serious interview, significant interview to an independent news channel was just yesterday. So, you know, he is still very much averse to having people talk back to him. I think our politicians generally have an aversion to the public talking back to them.
And I mean, have we really seen that much talk back from the public through social media platforms? From at least from the observation that we've made, monitoring you know, content from social media, there hasn't been that much at all.
Exactly, that's the other difficulty with social media, analyzing the role of social media. It's that it allows you to retreat into the kind of company that you feel comfortable in, and you don't have to listen to people who might disagree with you. So, you know, there is a lot of abuse that is traded, but very little by way of informed discussion, except within communities that are already in agreement with each other. So there is that kind of you could call it a ghettoization of the information domain, that people just retreat into the company that they feel comfortable with. They don't feel, and they're enabled to do it. Unlike in the traditional media, where you might be reading a newspaper and you might encounter a piece of information that is inconsistent with your own preconceived notions. In social media, you are enabled, you are empowered to retreat into the kind of company that you feel comfortable with, where you don't have to deal with disagreements and dissent. So that is the other point. You know, I don't know how much social media, of course, has been a major factor in this election, but I don't know how much it has changed people's minds or just entrenched them more deeply into an already formed opinion.
Yeah, well, interestingly, we have a question from a viewer here which is quite closely related to that point. And it's from Prashant Kumar, who says, don't you think that social media has actually played a major hand in escalating the direct and personal attacks in this whole election campaign? So the last few weeks on these Hangouts, we did talk a lot about hate speech or anti-Muslim sentiment, personal attacks on politicians. So it's interesting, you know, what do you think, you know, has social media actually enabled that even further?
Can I take that? Yeah. I think, yes, I think what Prashant has asked is the right question. But what has happened is it's allowed easy access for many or to take pot shots at each other. And social media has become the medium in many ways. And in fact, during this election, some of the vitriolic battles have been fought on the social media, both by the BJP, by the Aam Aadmi Party, and the Congress. So certainly, that shrill pitch has been, in a way, helped by the penetration of social media and the fact that it's making an impact. That's itself a manifestation of that. Asha?
There's also one point I'd like to say here. The social media has also given a chance to Indians to be argumentative. This is a platform where people can come and argue their points. So what Sukumar was earlier saying, that there may not have been too much of talk back to the politicians. Politicians' interaction on the social media has been quite less. I haven't seen too many politicians agreeing to do these kind of interesting hangouts where they're open to all kind of questions. I saw one of Arvind Kejriwal that was very interesting. I think it has given a chance to people to talk their mind out, and when they keep talking about this, a portion of that obviously translates into some kind of a swing, and that impacts the voters and that impacts the outcome. You cannot ignore that, irrespective of how many people may say, I don't think social media has done anything. I sincerely believe the social media, in a state, in a country where in cities, 37% of voters are young and influenced by their internet ability to connect and talk to many people and learn many things around the world, what's happening around them. I think they are fully aware of what they are saying, what they're encountering, and it's not that any stray messages go on. If somebody is putting a message, he instantly gets reactions, and he or she is ready to counter those reactions. That's also a great advantage the social media grants. Asha?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good point. Maxwell, I just wanted to see if you're with us and if you'd like to make a comment. No, I don't believe he is. We will move on. So, as I mentioned before, part of this whole discussion is really how much of an impact social media is going to have on swaying votes. And of course, we're not going to know that until the results come out. But how about looking forward to perhaps the next elections? Can you see social media becoming even more important going forward for the politicians or for voters being able to express their opinions, online in a different format?
I think politicians, Asha, I think the politicians have first time learned, especially politicians in India, some of them couldn't even use their handsets, relied on normal conversational politics. It will be a big challenge for them to take the step forward. For example, the Congress party. This is one party which has always remained out of the social media, haven't really gone hyperboard like the other two parties. Now they will have to take a long lesson, and the next election, I can be absolutely sure the Congress party will they will actually understand the importance of social media. It will grow. See, from 2013 to 2014, where the numbers have gone, the numbers will grow very, very fast, very rapidly. And that's a challenge to the traditional media. How much we believe, maybe I'm from old school of journalism, I still believe the traditional media, but the social media impact can never be ignored, and the political parties will all take that on board after these elections.
I want to add on to what Shantu is saying, and also whichever party loses, I can tell you the rest assured, the opposition is going to make life difficult for the government in New Delhi through the social media, because they'll realize that the power and importance of social media growing, and certainly, so whichever party comes to power, certainly the opposition is going to use social media very effectively when the government is in power as well.
And absolutely, I fully agree to you, sort of, especially on the fact, and this is a country where the Twitter handle or Twitter message has cost a top minister a top job in the cabinet. So social media, the perils of it and the advantages of it, both have to be taken on board. Asha.
Yeah, if I may just add something there. What we're talking about here is, incremental difference that social media can make. I think the media itself is, of course, there. It's almost taken for granted, but we should not underestimate the importance of the message also, because sometimes the media, of course, can be used in various ways. And take the case of the Aam Aadmi Party, which surprised everybody, including itself, last year in the Delhi State Assembly elections. Now, they are very candid about things that, the key breakthrough that they made was in direct street mobilization on issues like energy, electricity prices. They went to the people directly saying that, you're being rooked on electricity prices and you should actually be paying much less, and assured water supply and so on. So it was very much old-style politics that made the decisive difference. Now, the initial impact, the creating of the profile of the Aam Aadmi Party and so on, was done through the social media, especially in the form of the anti-corruption campaigns that they ran in 2011, before the party was formed. This is Arvind Kejriwal, Anna Hazare, that kind of that coalition of the two. But what made them a decisive electoral force was old-style mobilization around livelihood issues, and that was done on the streets. It was not done through social media. So if you look at the figures, if you look at the figures of internet penetration and so on, of course, most people access the internet through the mobile phone. So the broadband diffusion is just about 100 million, and it might seem a large number, but we have 800 million voters in this country. So, it's just 1/8 of that. So, I'm sorry, 100 million is the total number of internet users. broadband diffusion is just about 20 million. So it's really a very small figure if you consider that you have 800 million users. Now, the mobile phone is where you have the whole potential being realized, and that, of course, is a very potent tool. And as I said before, people believe when they hold that phone in their hands that they have a right to talk back, and they don't want to be talked down to. And so far, our politicians have always been using this, have been too accustomed to this mode of campaigning where they just talk down to the people. So they have to change their mindset, otherwise the people will kind of make up their own minds and effectively force them to, like the Aam Aadmi Party has made such a difference to the electoral equations, precisely because they are willing to go out there and listen to people. So whether that's through social media or through direct contact is another matter, but they are willing to listen to people. And ultimately, a political party has to be willing to shed that old habit of thought and listen to people, and then they can make use of the social media optimally, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Saurabh, you had something to say?
Yeah, I wanted to say that, in fact, part of the mobilization that Sukumar was talking about of the Aam Aadmi Party, especially during the agitation they had in Delhi, ahead of before they got into power here, was essentially because of social media. The messages were being passed through the social media, and obviously the mobile was being used very, very frequently. Certainly, so the whole mode has changed. Social media, yes, may not be the deciding factor per se alone, but certainly it is a huge influencer. And I think in the elections, as you will see in the outcome, and especially for the young voters, is certainly a huge influencer. The way trends are going on in the social media, the way messages are being passed, are being exchanged. Also, the other, be it the videos, be it maybe the pot shots that have been taken through the social media. It's all being watched by the young generation, and we track them very closely, and we think it has had a huge impact.
I do have a point here, Ashish. I mean, I just wanted to add to what Sukumar and Saurabh has said. We are looking at a country where a significant portion of the voters now are young voters. So the talk of the great divide which we talk of, the traditional media and the non-traditional media, will soon fade away, and there will emerge, and I'm very confident by the end of this year, a couple of years down the line, there will emerge in India, which is ready to disseminate messages at the drop of its hat. A country which has already got its telecom revolution will now enhance this dissemination of this information, which is so powerful that more and more political parties will try and understand how to get on to a bandwagon which young voters are following. And all parties are trying to do that. They're trying to understand that our young Indians using their handsets, trying to understand and trying to get into an argument before elections. And that is the magic. And obviously, we will see the results after the elections. But I think the social media is now increasingly becoming such a powerful tool that people cannot ignore. Let's not forget the Aam Aadmi Party got its biggest push from where? The social media. The social media actually triggered these huge arguments all over, and somewhere down the line, the Aam Aadmi Party got a huge push. They may have gone to the street, they may have taken off telephone cables or electricity cables and raised issues of price, water, and all of that. And it is not the common man. Don't forget, India's richest man, Mukesh Ambani, also today understands the importance of social media, from which his organization was far, far away. If you look at the Reliance website today, you will hardly see any information coming out. But if you see his social media campaign, which he has unleashed to counter the Aam Aadmi Party, you will realize that he has done a huge network he's building up just to say what is coming out against his name is wrong. So they understand, they realize that whatever is being said, some people need to counter, some people need to go with it. The social media is important and will remain important, and the importance will grow. Asha.
Thanks. Yeah, let's talk a bit about some of the successes or the fails that we've seen on social media, as you started to mention. And I think we started seeing the power of social media back in December last year with the Aam Aadmi Party, or the Common Man's Party, winning power in Delhi. So let's talk about how they're doing around this time around, and also have other political parties actually followed suit. Is there anyone who's standing out doing a great job, or are there just a lot of fails happening on social media?
The point which I want to make here is the Aam Aadmi Party has taken a lead in the social media in this election. Why? You know what Arvind Kejriwal is doing. That is what you call a leader's connect with his masses. You don't know what Rahul Gandhi is doing. And half of the population doesn't even know what Modi is doing. But the Aam Aadmi Party, the way they have planned their social media campaigns, it's an absolute transparency where they have said, this is what we are doing, this is what we are saying, this is what our agenda is. There are no ifs and buts in it. So many people have connected with them. BJP has taken, on the other hand, a first mover advantage. But because of its multiple dimensional and other issues between the old guard and the new guard, the RSS factor and all of that, they have started understanding the media, and they've started hyping it a bit now. Now that the countdown to the Varanasi election is there. But the unfortunate part is the party which is the oldest, the Congress, they have somewhere ignored this great importance of the social media. I distinctly remember last year, at the Chintan Singh in Jaipur, one of the Congress stalwarts, politician and cabinet minister, Kapil Sibal, had demanded that he be given 100 crores, and he wanted to create a blueprint for the social media. Unfortunately, that never happened. And as a result of which, you will see very few guys actually on the blogs, on Twitter, Facebook, and all of that, barring you see a Sanjay Jha or Pawan Khera somewhere, but you really don't see too many Congress people doing it. And that's where the difference lies. Asha.
Shantanu, I think the Congress, can I chip in now? Asha?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, as far as the Congress is concerned, they've been outsmarted in every possible way. It's remarkable. The ruling party is completely at sea when it comes to be it the campaigning style, be it its presence on the social media, or even the traditional media. So BJP certainly has outsmarted them by many, many millions miles away. And as far as Aam Aadmi Party is concerned, yes, certainly they have made huge inroads. But I see a small fatigue factor also setting after Arvind Kejriwal quit as Delhi's chief minister. A lot of people, even in the social media, who were very supportive of Arvind Kejriwal before he came to power in Delhi, and the fact that they supported Arvind Kejriwal and Aam Aadmi Party, seems to be disenchanted in some ways. This has been reflected in the social media as well, and that has gone in some ways to the advantage of the BJP and Narendra Modi, which has capitalized on the part of the Aam Aadmi Party not being able to run the government in Delhi, and that I think will play in some way as a factor when the results come out. Asha?
Thanks. Sukumar, how about you? I mean, one question I want to pose to you maybe a bit more specifically is, we've sort of been talking about the example being set really by the Aam Aadmi Party, but they've also made some mistakes on social media, and there's been a lot of fallout over some of the political leaders speaking out against official party policy, some so-called hate speech or anti-Muslim speech as well, which was really shared through social media. And if it wasn't for social media, maybe it wouldn't have become such a big story. So, who do you think is actually doing a really good job on social media? Because it seems though, as all parties are sort of making some mistakes.
Yes, indeed. I think, the Aam Aadmi Party has a natural constituency which is fairly comfortable with using social media, because there is this new aspirational class, mostly the youth, the young professionals who are comfortable with the new technologies, and they sympathize with the new style politics. And they kind of, the Aam Aadmi Party's relative openness to criticism and their ability to field different questions and address a variety of grievances resonates with them. They feel comfortable with that kind of a culture, and they feel very alienated from the old style politics of the Congress and the BJP. Now, the BJP had a first mover advantage, as Saurabh was saying, in terms of using the social media. They set up a website which was not identified with the BJP, but was very kind of proactive in terms of putting out the message in favor of Mr. Modi. And the Congress, of course, fell behind very badly, because I think they're still living in an old kind of mindset. They still have not shed that old mindset where they use the official media to essentially garner propaganda and political advantage. So I think the successes and fails, as you put it, are fairly clear. I think so far the BJP has had a much higher and louder profile on social media than its main competitor. And the Aam Aadmi Party, of course, is making a significant difference at the margins. Everybody knows that the Aam Aadmi Party will not be in the mainstream of contention, but in the margins it is making significant impact. But then I would also like to ask whether social media is that distinct from traditional media in this respect, because a recent study showed that in the month of April, the primetime news channels in the primetime slots had 31% coverage for Mr. Modi and of the BJP, and about 60% of this was positive. And Mr. Kejriwal had just about 12% or so, and Rahul Gandhi was far behind, single digits. So, in a sense, social media amplifies this and passes it on. It's a kind of force multiplier of the traditional media. They pick up the message from the traditional media and then kind of pass it on from hand to hand, and kind of it reaches a much larger segment of the population than the traditional media does. So even people who miss that broadcast get to know what is happening and so on. So that, I think, has been the decisive difference here. But whether the BJP's advantage in terms of social media would be as distinct, as pronounced, without the advantage they enjoy in the traditional media, that's a question we still have to address, because this election has gone, in terms of the control of the message, has gone very much the BJP's way right from the time it began, the campaign began. So how much of a difference social media has made is still very unclear, but obviously it is making a difference. How much exactly it is, we can't yet say.
So, Asha, what I wanted to say is, there are certain terms that get associated with parties, with nations when they go to elections. Now, if you use social media to your advantage, you are able to sway and try and trigger some kind of a passion on the net, as I call it. Now look at the word modification. I mean, a large bombardment of such ideas on the net eventually has given rise to this word called modification of India. Now it has its downsides also, which many people are not liking it. And the advantage, which the BJP claims it lies with them, is the fact that they have been able to drive it much before any other party could do that. And also the traditional media, I think that they are now getting over when full page advertisements will actually sway a voter to decide on the most of all national politics. They were at one point in time, they were fairly disinterested. Indian cities were known not for going out and voting. The trends are changing, and that's happening, in my opinion, is also because the argumentative Indian is now coming out on the streets, and they're understanding it. They are exercising their rights. They understand this through their handsets, through their laptops, through their desktops, cyber cafes. They try and go and understand how this change is coming about. So that's what is the advantage, or this is what a great power that lies with the social media, and India is witnessing it probably for the first time.
I call it democracy on their palm tops. In some ways, that social media has really got that. All you need to do is just to put it on your smartphone or even some other phone that you're using. It's all democracy that's coming to you. That's the reason why more and more people, especially youngsters, are using the social media to articulate their views, and that was represented widely in these elections. Asha?
Yeah, then that's what I was about to ask. Has this actually started challenging mainstream media to, up their coverage or up their game in terms of how they're covering the elections? Because, we've seen, like, one example is the Indian Express online. They've started integrating a lot more social media into their, so-called mainstream coverage. And I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with it, but they have something called a social map. Which is really interesting. It's showing the number of tweets by each candidate, number of Facebook posts. It's got the live feed of all their social media different pages, and it's also measuring sentiment in relation to that. And that is sort of complementing their, normal news cycle coverage of events that are happening. We're not really seeing so many other mainstream media, integrating social media. So is this, do you think, going to force mainstream media in the future to really change the way that they're covering elections, or even covering the party and the opposition post-elections?
It already is. In fact, many Indian TV channels are using social media. In fact, they've tied up with, say, Twitter to get trends on what's trending, what people are tweeting about, and certainly this change is quite visible. In fact, the traditional media houses are increasingly, and I think in days to come, they will be even forced to look at social media strategies more effectively.
Yeah, well, if I may just add something there. Yesterday, Mr. Modi, the BJP's prime ministerial candidate, spoke to Arnab Goswami on Times Now, the news channel. It was his first series interview, as I said, and went on for an hour, possibly more. And Times Now today is proudly advertising the fact that the hashtag Arnab, Modi speaks to Arnab, had X million number of, So they are kind of trying to capitalize on that, and obviously it's multiplying the viewership, because once that hashtag is created and it's passed on from Twitter, one user to another, people tune in and they multiply the viewership of that. So that is a kind of a positive for the traditional media. How they use social media to create a greater, larger, and more interested audience for themselves. There's also the other thing, which is that the occasional kind of deviations from the path of truth-telling are caught out. For instance, about 2 weeks back, the Daily News and Analysis, which is a newspaper published from Bombay, multi-edition newspaper, but headquartered in Bombay, published a kind of analysis of this recent spat that occurred between Mr. Modi and the Chief Minister of West Bengal, Mamata Banerjee, where she referred to him as the butcher of Gujarat, and then they kind of tried to do a fact check and found what is the official position in regard to his involvement in the riots in Gujarat in 2002. And from all the official records, they constructed a picture which showed that it's not quite that clear cut, that to say that he's got a clean chit. So within 12 hours, that article vanished from the website of the newspaper. But then the newspaper was unwilling to kind of come on record with the reasons why it had taken that article off. But then, the new media obviously functions differently, and it was there in the web archive, and then it got passed on from hand to hand on Facebook and Twitter. So, it got much larger traction because it was taken down from the website through the social media. So, it in a sense showed how traditional media, that their conventional strategies of highlighting certain and suppressing certain other facts will not work anymore. That once the truth is out there, once the story is out there, it has its own life.
Yep, exactly.
I think Asha, we're actually coming back to essentially agreeing to this fact that the way social media is being perceived in this country, elsewhere in the world. I mean, the first figure was the 2008 Obama elections. And since then, it's been on a high in every country, wherever there have been elections, or the Tahrir Square, or even women in Iran, even people in young boys in China. So I think the importance of the main point which I want to make here is the social media is now being understood by the political parties and the common person on ground. And they understand it very well. And as a result of which, look at the way there is a significant amount of opposition to the BJP's prime ministerial candidate because of the 2002 Gujarat pogrom. And that is alive, in my opinion, because of social media. Because there are many people who would tend to forget. They don't want to discuss a riot that has happened 12 years ago. But there are many things that keep coming back and remind people that when they vote, they should vote sensibly. So I think the importance of social media has been understood by across the board, even traditional media. Times of India hyping Arnab Goswami's copy is just smart marketing. They have been the best at it. They've been doing it for many years. So that will obviously give them a lot of eyeballs. Many people who missed the interview last night will again log on and they will like to watch it. And they'll give them the numbers and the money and all of that. But the fact that they were able to do it, even after the interview was telecast, I think that is where the magic lies of social media. That's where you could spread it across the world, and the world gets connected to you. So I think obviously Indians are learning it a little later, and 4, 5, 7 years later than when Obama started it, and that huge campaign was unleashed across the US in 2008. But I can guarantee you in the coming elections, the social media blitz would be much higher than ever before. Anyway, this is the second largest elections we are having since independence. So obviously it'll go much bigger, and the new generation of voters will be all young voters, much high on the internet and social media awareness. Asha.
Definitely. I want to take another question from a viewer. We actually have a lot of questions we're not going to get through. So I'm just going to pose this question to Saurabh. So the question is, it's again from Prashant Kumar, and he's asking, do you think that the Election Commission should fix the number of accounts that a political party can have, because potentially they're able to really spread their reach through multiple social media accounts. So should there be any kind of policing on that?
Well, absolutely. I wouldn't call it policing. I think it's important, especially in the context of a country like India, where there's still a large majority of people who are still coming to terms with the social media. So often what happens is unverified accounts which do not carry a clear affiliation are used to spread rumors, are used to foment even tension. So I think it's a very valid question, and I think Election Commission of India has to have a social media norm. And I think in the next few elections, especially elections which will be held after this round of general elections, certainly the Election Commission of India has to make sure that a party, for instance, the Election Commission of India publishes a list of official campaigners for each party. Similarly, they can do that and publish a list of social media accounts that each party has. It's like informing a voter. So anything that's coming out of that social media account, be it Facebook, be it Twitter, for our prospective voters, they can find out this is the correct account of that particular party, and this is what they need to follow, whatever comes out of that particular account. Asha?
Thanks. And a follow-up question to that, when it comes to the opposition, then, attacking or opposing, the policies of whoever, whatever party's in power going forward, should there be any kind of, content scrutinized or filtered at different levels before that, goes public? So the question here from an audience member is, should Facebook, Twitter, or the Election Commission have some kind of say over what content gets filtered? Sukumar.
I doubt if that's going to be effective because Facebook has its own policy in terms of, and it follows the jurisdiction, the laws that are applicable in the jurisdiction that it operates from. As we saw, YouTube in the case of that infamous film on the Prophet, which they refused to take down because they said that it's not illegal under US law. But finally, they took it down only because it violated the rights of one of the players in that film and exposed her to danger. So, I think it's going to be very difficult finding an agreed legal basis on which we can take down material from Facebook or Twitter. It has to be done by user. I believe the strength of the social media is it's entirely reliant on user-generated content, and it has to be left to the user's discretion to judge what is authentic and what is not, what needs to be passed on, what does not. And I think a lot of judgment is required, a lot of discretion, and there is a lot of stuff that gets passed around that is plain falsified or could be even inflammatory and dangerous. But we have to live with that danger, and I think post facto correction through the legal process, through established law, is the best we can do. I think to look at social media as a medium that can be censored, that where prior restraints can be imposed, would be to undo its entire potential.
I have a very strong point here, Asha.
Sure.
My point is, the growth of the social media has happened only because it's free, it's transparent, and that's where people come in, false reports fell on the wayside, and nobody bothers about them. And good content, serious content is always valued even on the social media platforms. Any attempt to try and tell a political party that how many websites you can have and how many Twitter handles you can have will trigger again some kind of a problem in this country. They will find ways to get more people to do that same work without being affiliated to the party. That all parties are used to it. I doubt that very much. I think the growth of social media has happened because it's free. It allows me to have my say, and then it goes on. People who want to follow me follow. People who feel if I'm writing something wrong, they move aside. But if someone keeps telling me that this is what you should do and this is what you should not do, then we'll have one more regulator. We have multiple regulators anyway in this country. So there'll be one more Twitter regulator, then we will have a Facebook regulator, and it will not solve any purpose. That's my point of view.
No, I'm not advocating a regulator of any kind, Chandru. I was saying Election Commission, because what has been also happening, if you've been monitoring social media, a lot of fake accounts have been created, which have been used to foment tensions, which have been used to create all kind of a whole negative campaign. That has to go off, because what has been happening is that, for a voter, for a prospective voters who want to be educated, often you're not able to find out whether it's authentic. Like for instance, Twitter now has authentic accounts, right? They authenticate account. It's a verified account. So, so if you're tweeting from that verified account, certainly that tweet is what you tweet. So all I was saying was that Election Commission certainly has to bear in mind that there is a huge repercussion associated with the social media. The fact more and more people are getting influenced. Certainly, there's a need not to police it, but to make it, make it easy for a prospective voter to make the decision, make an informed choice. Asha?
Point taken.
Add one little point here. The Election Commission is still struggling to deal with abuses of the traditional media. Like the last two elections, we've had this phenomenon of cash coverage, that candidates and political parties pay directly to newspapers for favorable news coverage. And only recently the Supreme Court has held that it is within its jurisdiction to impose a sanction on that practice where it is clearly evident. And I think asking it to deal with social media is going to be exposing it to too much complexity at this point.
Absolutely.
And secondly, I think the model code of conduct, which is, of course, doesn't have the force of law, but it has the moral force and allows the Election Commission to censure and reprimand candidates and political parties, it should be made applicable. There should be a kind of provisions in the Model Code of Conduct on the use of social media by candidates and by parties. But that, of course, is not equivalent to policing. It's more of a moral kind of stricture that the Election Commission can hold.
I have a point here. My point is, it's an election. You have rivals. You are encountering the rivals. They are saying something, you're countering them. Unless it is abusive, unless it is pornographic, I don't see a policing is required here. Political parties are also getting matured. From a time when they never wrote 2 lines in newspapers, almost all political leaders are veering towards writing blogs. Twitter handles and all kinds of things have gone up now, and more people are getting into the groove now. They understand the pitfalls of it, and I'm sure they're sensible enough to behave like that. The Election Commission obviously has much more stuff on its plate, and as witnessed in the last 48 hours in India, if it can handle that situation, I think they can think about social media, or at least putting a cap on what political parties or candidates should do at a much later stage. But I doubt that whether they will be able to do that at all.
I have another question. This is from Murali Krishnan. The question is, have regional parties in India been slow off the block in capitalizing on social media? Or is it that their content has just been overshadowed by the mainline parties?
Regional newspapers have always taken a lead in elections. It's common knowledge that the English newspapers have always followed the regional language Hindi newspaper, Tamil newspaper, Telugu newspaper, Odia newspapers. The newspaper market, where, let's say, the English media is far behind the regional media. But on the social media, regional social media and its growth hasn't happened that much. Let me cite an example to illustrate this. The online version of some of India's top dailies from Bengal or from Kerala, it took them a lot of time before the editors were convinced that their paper needs to be read by people who can't access that. It is the same trend that's happening in the social media. There are some groups, those groups are growing, but they're far outnumbered by people who are essentially talking in English and predominantly in Hindi. And that is obviously impacting, and the regional parties are also following into the same trap. I mean, the issues they want to raise, if you see Mamata Banerjee of the Trinamool Congress, what she wants to raise is somewhat limited as compared to what an Aam Aadmi Party or what somebody from the BJP would like to raise. But after all, she also gets the same platform to raise it. So I think the regional parties are a little behind. I fully agree with Mr. Krishnan, what he's saying. And the mainstream, or if I call the national political parties, they're far ahead. Asha.
I think I want to add to.
Sorry. I just want to check in to see if Maxwell has returned. Are you here? No. Okay. Sorry, Sarah. Go ahead.
Yeah. What I was saying to I was talking to a leader in the Bahujan Samaj Party, which is a party in Uttar Pradesh led by Mayawati. They feel that the reason why they don't want to have a very effective social media strategy is because parties like them, their voters do not follow the social media. So obviously there are a lot of regional parties who still believe that their voters can be convinced through traditional means, through door-to-door campaigning, through rallies, through mass mobilization. So they are still feeling that the social media is still an alien concept. So certainly there are parts of India, pockets, where certain regional parties feels that social media is still a secondary tool to attract voters. Asha?
Yeah, but sort of also there's a point here. The BSP may say it now that they don't want to use the social media because bulk of their voters are from the poor bloc. They don't want to do that. But let's not forget, a couple of years ago, when they wanted to hide the symbol, an elephant, they all went to the social media. So today they may say that they don't want social media.
That was meant for the audience. of course, and to make sure that people in Delhi, the influencers and the decision makers, they get those back, not because of the voters.
No, I think the Bahujan Samaj Party, although its constituency generally are the underprivileged, they still have access to social media through the cell phone. I think because in India, I think number of SIM cards that are active is well in excess of 800 million or something. So I think the cell phone is fairly ubiquitous, and it is used as an instrument of campaigning. I think what's happened is that regional parties have generally fallen through the cracks in this whole campaign coverage, in the sense that we began with the preconception that this is a head-to-head between Narendra Modi and the Congress, between Narendra Modi and Rahul Gandhi, and that the Aam Aadmi Party and Mr. Arvind Kejriwal are kind of going to make a small difference, a dent in the at the margins. And that we have stuck to that template. And I have a suspicion that when the results are in on May 16th, some of us are going to be a little surprised by the performance of the regional parties, especially by the BSP, which has generally had very, very little traction in the media through this entire campaign, and by Mamata Banerjee, Jayalalitha, and so on and so forth. These are going to be pretty important players in the post-election scenario, and I think that picture is going to emerge on May 16th. And it should be a lesson to many of us in the media, about how we should not let our early preconceptions run away with us when we are actually covering ongoing events.
Not exactly, Sukumar, what you're saying is, in the post-election, if the regional parties have bigger numbers than expected, and obviously then there will be horse trading and all of that. But if you compare that to what we are talking about, the social media and its impact, regional parties also have started using that. They may not use it as
nobody can ignore the social media. Of course, nobody can ignore the social media. And I'm sure that they're using it. It's just that the message is not coming through, because the message is not as loud. It's not as loud, it's not as voluble, and it's in a different language. It's in different language. It's not in Hindi or English, which tends to be understood by.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Also, what I was saying is it's not the primary tool. What we were saying is that they're still resorting to the traditional ways of campaigning and connecting to their voters. Obviously, they are using social media, certainly, yes.
Yes, they are using it, except that the message is not coming through. We don't hear the message because we are sitting in a different place. In Delhi, that message is not very clear because Delhi is too obsessed with the national parties, and besides, that is a different language. It's in Bengali, it's in Tamil.
It's the problem with Delhi. The other problem with Delhi is too obsessed with itself. It doesn't want to listen to any.
Exactly.
That's a problem with Delhi. So we feel that since we are in Delhi, the world should listen to us, and we should not listen to anybody. I think regional parties are sending their messages very strong and clear to their constituencies, and that Delhi may not be a constituency for them. So they have some candidates here in the city, but actually their constituencies, their regions, and that's where they want to remain, that's where they want to grow, and they may eventually come in as a third party or third front, whatever which has been discussed in some corridors here. Asha.
Thanks, guys. We seem to be out of time, unfortunately, and we did have some other questions to get through, but we'll have to leave it there. So I just want to thank all of our panelists and our viewers, especially those who asked questions. I hope that everyone has enjoyed these Hangouts on Air for the Open Elections India project with Google+. This is our final Hangout. It will go online on YouTube later on, so if you need to watch it back or share it with anyone, the link will be on our community page shortly. In the meantime, we'll see everyone back on the Google+ community for the final election results and campaigning. Thanks to everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Saurabh. Sukumar.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.